I don't think my parents ever planned to have me. They always said they wanted to stay child-free when they got married, and relatives have told me I was a happy accident. At first, life seemed okay, but as I grew older, it became clear my parents didn't want to invest time in me. Their attention was consumed by their business, and I was always a distant second dot. We didn't have extended family nearby. My grandparents lived in other states, and I didn't meet most of them until I was an adult. So my childhood was a mix of solitude, TV, and school. By the time I was 10, my parents barely acknowledged birthdays or holidays. I once convinced them to buy a fake Christmas tree because without it, we wouldn't have had a tree at all. My parents were the stereotypical wine-drinking, all-black-wearing snobs who seemed to frown at everything. That's how they still were the last time I saw them. They were always aloof, their work their sole priority. When I turned 16, I asked to work part-time at their business, thinking it could be a chance to bond with them or at least learn something useful. But they brushed me off, saying there were no openings. Looking back, I suspect they just didn't want me there. By 18, they made it abundantly clear I was no longer welcome at home. I barely had enough money saved from my part-time job to start college, let alone live independently. Yet they handed me an official notice to vacate. They didn't even help me move. A friend's dad with a truck stepped in, and I ended up in a rundown apartment. Moving out at 18 felt like being thrown into the deep end of life without knowing how to swim. My first apartment was barely livable. The walls were thin, the plumbing was questionable, and I shared the space with roaches more often than I'd like to admit. But it was all I could afford with my part-time retail job. I tried to make it work. I juggled shifts, kept my expenses as low as possible, and told myself this was just a temporary hurdle. But life had other plans. After a few months, my boss started nitpicking every little thing I did. One day, I got fired over reasons so trivial that I can't even remember them now. I later found out I wasn't the only one. A few of us reported the manager to corporate, and eventually they were fired for stealing and other shady behavior. Corporate even updated my record to say I'd been laid off, which helped my resume, but that didn't change the fact that I was jobless. Unemployment hit me hard. I'd never been great at managing money, and without steady income, my savings quickly dried up. Rent, bills, and groceries piled up until I couldn't keep up anymore. When I finally got evicted, I had no choice but to ask my parents for help. That was a mistake. I remember standing on their porch, freezing in the winter air, hoping they'd let me stay just for a while. But they didn't even let me inside. My mom coldly told me they had moved on and couldn't take me in. The door closed in my face, and I was left with nothing but the sting of rejection and the weight of my mistakes. A friend's dad let me pitch a tent in his backyard for a bit, but it was brutal. Sleeping outside in the winter wasn't just uncomfortable, it was soul-crushing. I felt so out of place, like I was falling further and further behind while everyone else was moving forward. Most of my friends had gone off to college or started their lives elsewhere. I was stuck, scrambling to survive day by day. It wasn't until a neighbor of my parents, someone who barely knew me, took pity and let me crash on her couch for a few weeks that I saw a glimmer of hope. She even helped me track down my extended family. At first, my parents resisted giving me contact information, but with some persistence, and probably a dose of guilt, they finally handed over a list of relatives I could call. Getting that list from my parents was like pulling teeth. They seemed almost afraid of what might happen if I reconnected with the rest of the family. Maybe they worried about being judged for the way they'd abandoned me, or maybe they just didn't care enough to make it easy. Either way, I finally had a thread of hope to follow. When I started calling the names on that list, I didn't know what to expect. To my surprise, my dad's side of the family was overjoyed to hear from me. They hadn't seen me since I was a baby, and as it turned out, I was the only grandchild. My grandparents didn't waste any time. They flew me out to stay with them within days. The warmth they showed me was overwhelming. It was the first time in years I felt genuinely cared for. They welcomed me like I'd always been a part of their lives, even though my parents had cut them off long ago. My grandparents didn't mince words about their feelings toward my parents. They were furious about how I'd been treated and made it clear they wanted nothing to do with them anymore. In fact, they had formally disowned my parents and removed them from their wills years ago. Living with my grandparents changed everything. For the first time, I had stability. They encouraged me to save up and even helped me get a decent job. With their support, I managed to enroll in community college, and eventually, I earned my associate's degree. It wasn't easy. Working and studying at the same time was exhausting. But I was finally building something for myself. After a few years, my grandparents decided to retire to Arizona for health reasons. They wanted to sell their house, and they offered it to me at a price so low it felt like a gift. I jumped at the opportunity, though it was bittersweet to see them go. Owning a home was a huge milestone for me, and I was determined to honor their generosity by making the most of it. For a while, life was calm. My job required me to travel occasionally, which meant I wasn't home much, but I didn't mind. I didn't have pets or a partner tying me down, and I liked the freedom to focus on my goals. I finally felt like I was moving forward, leaving the shadows of my past behind. But then, in late 2020, everything changed. I came home from a 2-week work trip to find a strange white van parked in my driveway. My stomach dropped when I saw the logo on the side. It was my parents' business. I hadn't seen or spoken to them in years, and now, somehow, they were here, living in my house. I froze on my driveway, staring at that van like it was a ghost from my past. My parents here. It didn't make sense. My house was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place I could finally feel safe. But as I walked toward the door, a creeping sense of dread settled over me. When I stepped inside, there they were, lounging in my living room as if they owned the place. My mom greeted me like nothing was wrong, her smile fake and unnerving. My dad barely glanced up, too busy scrolling on his phone. The nerve of it left me speechless for a moment. They acted as if the last decade of neglect, abandonment, and silence hadn't happened. "Why are you here?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. They brushed off my questions like it was no big deal. They claimed they'd fallen on hard times. Apparently, their business had failed, and they'd sold nearly everything they owned to pay off debts. What little they had left was packed into that van outside. They didn't ask for my permission to stay. They simply assumed it was their right because the house had once belonged to my grandparents. I told them, point blank, that this wasn't their home anymore. It was mine, and they had no right to be here. My dad scoffed, and my mom started pulling out the emotional manipulation, talking about how much they had sacrificed for me. Sacrificed? The irony was almost laughable, considering they'd tossed me out without a second thought when I was 18. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me, so I told them to leave. They refused. In fact, they doubled down, insisting they had squatters' rights since they'd already been there for a couple of weeks while I was away. My stomach churned as I realized they'd probably been planning this for months. They'd broken into my house, through an unlocked window no less, and taken copies of my spare keys, which I'd foolishly left hanging on a hook in the kitchen. When I called the police, I thought they'd help me remove my parents. But my parents had come prepared with lies. They told the cops they had a verbal lease agreement with me, and they'd even changed their address with the DMV to make it look legitimate. Without security cameras or proof to back up my claims, the officers treated it like a family dispute and told me to go through the courts. I was furious. My house, my sanctuary, had been hijacked by the very people who had abandoned me when I needed them most. And now, thanks to legal loopholes and their blatant lies, they were staying rent-free while I scrambled to figure out what to do next. They didn't even try to make amends or show gratitude. My dad worked long hours driving a delivery truck, and my mom picked up a sales job. But they contributed almost nothing to the household. They gave me a measly $100 a month for the bills, and had the audacity to act like they were doing me a favor. Whenever I confronted them about rent, they'd bring up the 18 years they spent raising me, claiming I owed them for that. Their behavior only got worse. My mom started trying to take over the house, rearranging furniture, and even demanding I give them the master bedroom. It was like they were determined to make me feel like a guest in my own home, but I refused to back down. I reminded them every day that this wasn't their house, and I was doing everything I could to get them out. The months dragged on like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. My parents showed no signs of leaving, and every day with them in my house felt like a battle for control. My dad was rarely home, always out driving his delivery route, but my mom more than made up for his absence. She constantly tried to assert herself as the head of the house, acting like I was some ungrateful tenant instead of the homeowner. She didn't just stop at rearranging furniture or making demands. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes around the house, complain about everything from the lighting to the kitchen setup, and even scold me for not keeping things the way she liked. It was as if she was daring me to break under the pressure. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was determined to see this through. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly to push the legal process forward. Evicting them wasn't as simple as filing paperwork and waiting for the court date. The pandemic had slowed everything down, and my parents knew it. They took full advantage of the delay, stretching out their stay as long as they could. They even went so far as to mock me for trying to kick them out, acting like I was the villain in this situation. I called my grandparents to vent about the chaos, and their anger at my parents was palpable. They apologized profusely, saying they never would have sold me the house if they'd known my parents would pull something like this. But I assured them it wasn't their fault. I'd already started the eviction process, and it was just a matter of time before I could legally force my parents out. Still, time was not on my side. Every day they stayed, my stress levels climbed higher. My mom seemed to enjoy pushing my buttons, constantly reminding me that they were family and deserved better than what I was giving them. I snapped one day and told her I never asked to be born, and their duty as parents didn't entitle them to freeload off me now. Her face went red with anger, but for once she didn't have a response. Finally, after months of waiting, we went to court. My parents tried every trick in the book to delay the inevitable. They brought up the $100 they'd been giving me, hoping to convince the judge it was a legitimate rental agreement, but their lies couldn't hold up under scrutiny. The judge saw right through them and ruled in my favor. My parents were given 30 days to vacate the premises. You'd think they would have started packing right away, but no. They continued to drag their feet, acting as though they could somehow change my mind. They alternated between trying to guilt me into letting them stay and flat out ignoring me. Every morning, I marked the days left on the calendar in the living room with a red marker, making it crystal clear when their time was up. When the final day arrived, they were still scrambling to move their belongings. My mom, ever the manipulator, gave me sad looks as if to say, "How could you do this to us?" But I didn't budge. As they loaded the last of their things into their van, I was already changing the locks on the doors. My dad looked furious, but my mom pulled him away before he could say anything. They left without a word. When their van finally disappeared down the road, I stood on the porch, staring after it, a mixture of exhaustion and relief washing over me. For the first time in months, my house was mine again. The silence felt heavy but comforting, a sharp contrast to the chaos my parents had brought with them. I locked the newly installed doors, took a deep breath, and let out a long sigh. It was over. But the emotional toll lingered. Their intrusion had reopened old wounds I thought I'd moved past. Memories of their neglect, the cold dismissal when I was 18, and the way they tried to manipulate me all came flooding back. It was hard not to be angry. Harder still not to wonder why they had come back into my life just to tear through it again. For a few days, I allowed myself to sit with those emotions. Then I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let their actions define me. I had already built a life from nothing once. I could rebuild the peace they'd disrupted. I threw myself into making my house feel like a home again. I rearranged the furniture back to the way I liked it, replaced a few things they'd damaged, and even redecorated to erase any trace of their presence. It was cathartic, almost like reclaiming my identity. My grandparents called frequently to check on me, their concern and support a steady reminder that not all family bonds are broken. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that my parents had managed to start a new business using inheritance money from my maternal grandfather, who had passed away recently. That explained how they'd bounced back so quickly after their financial collapse. They didn't reach out to me directly, of course, but I knew from distant relatives that they were already bragging about their success. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. They'd forced themselves into my life, squatted in my home, and then moved on without a shred of remorse or accountability. But as tempting as it was to dwell on their audacity, I decided I didn't want to waste my energy on them anymore. They were strangers to me now, people I once knew but no longer had any connection to. I started thinking about my future. Arizona had always been in the back of my mind. Warmer weather, a fresh start, and the chance to be closer to my grandparents. I reached out to my employer to see if there were opportunities to transfer, but it wasn't possible. That left me with a tough decision: stay where I was or start over completely. I've been leaning toward leaving. There's nothing tying me to this house, no roots that feel worth holding on to. If I move, I'll be leaving behind any chance of my parents finding me again, and that thought alone is comforting. They're dead to me now, and I plan to keep it that way. I've started making preparations, just in case. Packing up what I'd need for a move, looking at potential jobs, and scouting places to live. Whether I stay or go, one thing is certain: I will never let my parents back into my life. They've shown me who they are, and I have no interest in reopening that door, figuratively or literally. My focus now is on building a future I can be proud of. I've learned the hard way what it means to stand on my own, and I know I'm stronger for it. My grandparents have reminded me time and again that family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and the people who stand by you when it matters most. That's the legacy I choose to carry forward, not the one my parents tried to impose on me. And maybe someday, when I'm ready, I'll create a family of my own. One that knows what it means to truly care for each other. Until then, I'll keep moving forward, one step at a time. Story 2. I was married for 12 of the 14 years that I spent with my wife. Was it a perfect number? Yet there were no marriages? Despite our ups and downs, I always believed that we would confront every challenge together. The idea of our parting ways never even occurred to me. She was more than just my spouse. My partner was her, my closest companion. I believed that person would always be there for me. Then my life changed in September 2022. I got into an automobile accident. No, that was a serious accident. I was on my way to a job site. I work as an HVAC technician, or I was anyway. Suddenly, a garbage truck crashed into my vehicle. Fast speed. I only recall my head striking the side of the door and the sound of the impact glass breaking. I swear that when I woke up, time seemed to slow down. I was being pulled out while being asked if I could move my arms or legs. At first, I didn't really comprehend what was going on. I was very inebriated. The thing is this: thank God I didn't break anything. I initially believed that I had struck it lucky, but the ache began a few days later. I was experiencing intense searing pain in my lower back, as if someone had stuck a knife inside and left it there. I initially believed it would disappear, but it persisted. I made an effort to endure it. At first, my wife was encouraging and helped me out with small household tasks, while assuring me that it would only last temporarily. However, things changed after I was limping around for almost 2 months. I quote, "Ma'am, not sure when," but I noticed that she was sighing more and that she rolled her eyes when I asked her to retrieve something that I couldn't reach down for. I convinced myself it was stress at the time. After all, we just had one source of income because I wasn't working. I am aware that's difficult. Still, there was a difference. I attempted to return to work by December 2022. I hated feeling worthless, but my doctor wasn't pleased. I persuaded him to give it a shot, and I gave it my all. After 3 days, I passed out while putting tools in my van. The agony was excruciating. My doctor formally placed me on indefinite leave, and my supervisor advised me to go home. That quote when I realized the truth. I had no intention of returning anytime soon. I thought I was failing my wife. I had always been the type of person who did what was expected of him. I put in a lot of work, paid my bills, and fixed other household issues. I was broken now. Additionally, I couldn't help but feel burdensome. I made an effort to stay positive. She felt less pressured after I sought for financial assistance to pay the mortgage and other expenses for which we were eligible. Perhaps, I reasoned, everything will settle down and things would return to normal. Then followed the event with the appendix on May 20th and 23. I was sweating profusely when I woke up in the middle of the night. The inside of my stomach felt like it was being torn apart. For a few hours, I attempted to ignore the discomfort, but it only became worse. I woke her up at 5 in the morning and informed her that something was up. I must visit the hospital. She moaned and gave me the most obnoxious face, as if I had asked her to do something really annoying. Is it really that serious? It was unbelievable to me. The pain literally made me double over. Yes, I must go now, I informed her. What did she do, do you know? Before we departed, she changed her cosmetics and hair. I waited for her to be ready while stooped over in the car. I had to drive myself to the emergency room since she wouldn't drive. With her seated next me, I am not really sure how I did it. The medical staff at the hospital informed me that my appendix had burst. I required quick and urgent surgery. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation after the procedure because they said I had an infection. In order to assist me recuperate at home, I called my wife and asked if she could remain with me or at the very least take a few days off. What did she say? I have employment, therefore I can't. I understand. Important work. However, she was unable to tolerate even a single day as I lay in a hospital bed with a stomach infection. I recall thinking, what the hell happened to us? As I lay there by myself that night, connected to machinery. She hardly spoke when I arrived home the following day. No. How do you feel? Or is there anything you need? Nothing. I seemed to be nothing more than a bother in her life. That's when I began to doubt everything. Upon reflection, I think that's when I began to lose hope, but I pushed it down rather than face it. I reassured myself that she was simply under stress and didn't intend to appear unconcerned. I disregarded the warnings. I didn't want to think that everything was going wrong. The worst thing, I believe, was feeling isolated. Despite the fact that she was in the same residence, I was totally alone. I wanted to share my feelings with her. How terrified I was for our future, my career, and my health. However, she always silenced me when I tried to open out. It will be all right, she would say, sighing. She made it obvious she didn't want to discuss it in this contemptuous manner. By the time June arrived, I was beginning to realize how far apart we had become. It was similar to having a roommate rather than a wife. I believed that once I started to feel better physically, we could possibly repair it. I was mistaken. As a result, our relationship was deteriorating by June 2023. Not merely strange, but distinctly tense, as if I were treading carefully in my own house. Everything I did seemed to irritate her. She acted as though I was a burden whenever I asked for assistance. She would roll her eyes at me as if I were being dramatic if I attempted to do something on my own without asking for assistance. I had lost my sense of how to win. We were seated on the couch one evening at that time. Even though the TV was on, I wasn't actually watching it. She casually mentioned that she's now back paid in this marriage. I looked at her for a moment, trying to be sure I understood her. Paid? I asked again. What is the intended meaning of that? She gave me this half-smiling, half-irritated face and said something along the lines of, well, I've been keeping everything together for months now, taking care of things, paying bills. I was astonished, not angry. Don't let the door hit you on your way out, I joked back. I realized that was dumb, but I said it in jest, the same way couples make fun of one another. I assumed we would just laugh it off and go on. She didn't. She sprang back as her face fell. Do you find that amusing? Do you know how confined I feel at the moment? I was at a loss for words. Captured? I had been coping with my mishap. The surgery, the back agony, everything. I wasn't pleading with her. All I needed was for her to stay by my side. Look, I understand, I told her. It's terrible for both of us. Although I'm aware that I haven't been able to work, I'm making every effort to make things better. To save you from having to handle everything by yourself, I requested for financial assistance for the mortgage. She gave a shrug, as if it didn't count. Yes, but I'm still responsible for all expenses. It hurt. I believed that my efforts were insufficient. Perhaps she simply needed to vent, so I didn't bring it up again. But after that, things became more bizarre. She informed me a few days later that she would be spending the night at a coworker's house. She told me she needed to talk to someone about her feelings when I inquired why. I told her because I didn't want to quarrel. Go ahead if it helps. Perhaps this is good, I thought to myself. Perhaps she'll feel better when she returns, and we can work on ourselves. She remarked that her birthday was approaching the following week. I thought we would spend it together as usual. We had been together for 14 years after all. I didn't even consider asking. So one night I mentioned it in passing. For example, would you like me to book a reservation somewhere? Or would you like to stay home and do something? She paused. In fact, a female from work and I are going out to supper. I blinked. You don't want to be with me on your birthday? She grinned, but it wasn't a friendly one. I have plans already. It's only dinner. I was hurt. I won't tell lies. Every year I made an effort to make her birthday even more memorable because it had always held particular meaning for me. It really got to me that she would choose to spend it with someone else. But I didn't argue. She probably just needed a vacation from all the stress, I assured myself. Something didn't feel right the next day. I'm not sure why, but I kept getting the impression that she wasn't giving me everything. I had never heard her mention this girl from work before, so perhaps that was the reason. I then asked her directly, which coworker are you having dinner with? She appeared irritated. Why is it important? It's only a friend. I wasn't persuaded. Is it a guy? I asked. She hesitated for a moment. It was only a moment, but I saw the number. It's a girl, I told you. I had trouble sleeping that night. I couldn't stop thinking. I knew she wasn't telling the truth, whether it was paranoia or gut instinct. I made the decision to examine her phone the following morning. I had to know, even though I knew it was wrong. As it turned out, she had texted someone from work who was saved as Mike. That evening, I noticed a message regarding supper, which was obviously organized with him. Not a girl. Later that evening, I confronted her when she returned. I informed her that I was aware she had dated a man rather than a coworker. She made no attempt to deny it. She simply appeared upset that I had discovered it. You're monitoring my phone, but why? You don't believe me? I lost my temper. Have faith in you? You blatantly misled me about your companion. There was nothing wrong with you. Why tell lies? She retorted that I was suffocating her and that she was sick of me being there all the time. All I needed was an evening out. Is it really so difficult to comprehend? What I was hearing was unbelievable. She lied and went out with another man on her birthday rather than celebrating it with me, her spouse. I questioned her directly if there was a relationship between them. She gave an eye roll. God forbid, it's only dinner. That night, we argued for hours. I packed a bag and drove to my mom's house to chill off because I was so exhausted by the end of it. All I had to do was step outside and reflect. I didn't want to continue fighting, so I didn't tell her where I was going. Space would help, I thought. However, she was waiting for me when I returned later to pick up some clothes. She began to yell, inquire as to my whereabouts, and accuse me of abandoning the marriage. My mind was blown away by that. I took a couple hours off to relax, and now I'm the villain. She didn't want to spend her birthday with me, so I informed her that she was the one lying. However, she turned it around on me by claiming that I didn't give a damn about how she felt. I felt so defeated at that moment. I was at a loss for what to do. I considered permanently leaving, but then I recalled the 14 years we had spent together. I reminded myself that we could still get through this difficult time. I was mistaken. Our relationship was no longer merely uncomfortable following the chaos surrounding her birthday dinner. They were damaged. The experience of living in the same home as someone you've been with for more than 10 years and still feeling like strangers is beyond words. We would hardly speak to one another when she got home from work. When we did speak, it was about trivial things like whether you paid the electricity bill or if you wanted me to go buy groceries. That's all. We had always been the talkative type of relationship, so it was strange. I used to update her on my day, my work, and any amusing incidents that transpired. She would share with me her weekly plans and her coworkers. By July 2023, however, our chats had become strained, as if we were both waiting for the other to lose it. She returned home one evening, later than normal. Even though it wasn't too late, perhaps 10 o'clock, I noticed. Where were you? I asked. I don't even want to come across as accusatory. I was just wondering. She let out a loud sigh. As if I had asked her the most stupid thing ever, I was out with buddies, as I mentioned. Which pals? I pushed. She had the same annoyed look on her face that I was beginning to recognize. Why is it important? Then it dawned on me. She was no longer concerned. Not about my emotions. Not in relation to the marriage. None of it. I wasn't calling her a liar or cheater. All I needed to know was her location, since we were wed. However, it seemed as though she wished to keep every aspect of her life distinct right now, as though I had no right to know. Perhaps I was making too much of it, I thought. I repeatedly reminded myself, you simply lack confidence as a result of everything that has transpired. But that night wasn't the only one. It was all of it. The way she increasingly avoided being at home and the way she was emotionally withdrawing. The fact that she no longer even gave me a glance, as if I were a mere man residing in her home. It was too much for me to handle. I thought we should speak. I invited her to join me for a seat the following morning. I felt anxious. I was frightened of what she might say, so I didn't want to have the talk at all, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. We can't continue this way, I informed her as I sat her down. We need to discuss anything that's bothering you. We have endured too much to simply give up at this point. After giving me a long look, she remarked, I feel like I don't have space anymore. I'm overburdened. Space left me speechless. As it was, we were scarcely able to communicate. I told her that while it's okay if you need space, you can't ignore me entirely. We must collaborate on this. Then she struck me with something unexpected. I believe I need a private area, a spot all to myself. Getting an apartment has been on my mind, a flat. What I was hearing was unbelievable. How is that going to fix anything? I questioned her. Do you believe that our marriage will be saved by moving out? I need time to get my thoughts straight, so she said, sure. I didn't purchase it. I informed her that moving out would not resolve the issue. Running away is what that is. You are aware that I am currently unable to pay for this residence on my own. As if it weren't her concern, she shrugged. I can no longer live this way. That day we fought for hours. I pleaded with her to change her mind. I assured her that I would attend therapy and that we could try counseling together to resolve the issue. She turned everything off. She also handled it with such composure, as if she had already decided. I told her directly, I'll file for divorce if you go. You won't do that, she replied, rolling her eyes. The weeks that followed were terrible. I sensed her moving away even more when she began actively searching for apartments. She returned home each day. I felt as though I was living with a stranger. Despite my best efforts to remain polite, I was unable to conceal my hurt. As I stared at her, I would ask myself, how did we get here? Are you sure this is what you want? I asked her again at one point, Are you truly planning to go? Yes, she replied. It's for the best, in my opinion. I was unable to comprehend it. She was behaving as if it didn't matter that we had been together for 14 years. As if I were nothing. I was not comfortable with something a week before to her move-in date. I began to consider constantly. She arrived home late. She talked about how far away she had been for months and all the coworkers she spent time with. I could no longer resist the feeling in my stomach that something else was happening. I did something I'm not proud of while she was at work. I looked at her Apple Watch. I knew it was linked to her phone since she had left it on the kitchen counter that morning. I had to admit that what I found made me sick, even though I told myself I was insane and that I wouldn't find anything. She exchanged texts with Mike, a man she worked with. For months, the texts had been sent. Months. I came across one in which she texted him, I really want you. When are we able to connect? I felt as though everything had suddenly fallen apart as I sat on the kitchen floor and stared at that small screen that night. I confronted her when she got home. I saw the messages, I told her. She laughed at first. In fact, I laughed. Are you serious? You looked through my belongings. I was not going to back down. You've been speaking with him for months, I said. You intend to have sex with him? What else should I be thinking? Her expression changed. It's just a joke, she said. This is being exaggerated by you. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I joked with her. Do you find it amusing to converse in such a manner with another man? She finally gave in at that point. Perhaps I wouldn't need to search elsewhere if you truly paid attention to me. That was it. I was at a loss for words. I had been trying to make things better for months. I now understand that she didn't give a damn. She had left already. I let her go when she moved out in August 2023. I felt like I was caught watching my own life unravel in slow motion when August 2023 finally arrived. My wife was formally moving out after finding an apartment and signing the lease. I wish I could say that I put up more of a fight to stop her. In actuality, though, I was emotionally and psychologically spent. You simply run into a wall at one point. It was cruel the week before she moved out, you know. The household tension was intolerable. We were no longer actually conversing, unless it was absolutely required, such as scheduling the arrival of the movers or deciding which furnishings she would take. To be honest, I didn't care who received what, therefore I didn't dispute about it. All I wanted was for it to end. It felt unreal the day she packed up. I watched as boxes containing her belongings vanished from the home we had constructed together 10 years prior. It was made worse by the fact that she was unusually composed throughout. There was no nostalgia, no sobbing. She showed no signs of difficulty. She seemed to no longer even recognize me. I questioned her once. "Why are you doing this? Would you mind giving me another explanation?" As if I were the one acting irrationally, she let out a sigh. "I need my space, as I've already stated. I have to work things out on my own." I made an effort to press her. "Determine what? Will you be returning soon?" She didn't respond. Rather, she retrieved an additional box and brought it outside to her vehicle. I learned all I needed to know from that stillness. I assisted her in moving some of the heavier items, but I'm not sure why. Assisting her to leave me felt strange. However, a part of me hoped that this would provide me with closure. Perhaps I would finally come to terms with it if I watched her leave with her own 2 feet. It didn't. Spoiler alert. I brought the final box up to her apartment at the complex, put it down, and had a look around. It was a modern, compact, and pleasant place. Large windows, white walls, and an empty space. I realized then that she was looking forward to this. I was afraid she was going to go. It was something she had been anticipating. "Are you happy now?" I asked her before I left. I will never forget the expression she gave me. Cold, but not depressed or furious. "I'm not sure yet." I gave a nod and left. I've never felt so alone as I did on that first night without her. I became aware of how empty our peaceful home felt without her as I sat there. Her side of the closet was empty, and everything she had was gone. The house seemed more like a reminder of everything that had crumbled than a place to call home. That night, I was unable to sleep. I simply lay there and stared at the ceiling while mentally reliving the previous few months. Everything. The battles, the letters, the operation, the accident. I was constantly questioning myself. What went wrong? Did she not think I was enough? Was there anything I could have done to prevent this? I attempted to resume my routine the following morning, but nothing felt the same. I made myself get up and go because I had physical therapy scheduled. The stress of everything made my back ache worse, and it wasn't getting better. My therapist took note. I gave her the truth when she inquired about my well-being. Not very good. I explained the situation to her, and she listened. And someone truly articulated what I needed to hear for the first time in months. "This cannot be all your fault. You didn't request to be harmed. You didn't request that she back off." Although hearing that didn't change anything, it did cause me to think differently. I felt like I was damaged after spending so much time criticizing myself for everything, as if I was solely to blame. Perhaps it wasn't, though. Everything changed when I learned something 2 weeks after she moved out. A mutual acquaintance texted me to check on me and, in passing, noted that I had seen her name at that downtown bar last night. She was with a man. They appeared to be quite comfortable. All I did was sit there and look at my phone. I knew deep down that she wasn't searching for time or space to ponder, even if I didn't want to believe it. The entire time. She had another person waiting in the wings. The parts began to fit together. Her late evenings, her sudden craving for companionship, Mike's text. While I was still trying to figure out how to fix us, she had been planning this for months. She had moved on already. I was in a daze for the remainder of that day. I didn't give her a call. I didn't text her. What was the purpose? She had already decided. I informed a lawyer I wanted to file for divorce over the phone the following morning. She responded incredulously when I eventually told her a few days later. "You're merely bluffing," she remarked with a sly smile. Do I appear to be bluffing? I fired back. After that, she remained silent. I quote, am not sure if she expected me to give in or plead with her to return. But I didn't. I had been feeling inadequate and like a burden for months. However, I realized that I deserved better after witnessing her lack of concern. Since we were childless, the divorce process proceeded swiftly. There was little for us to quarrel over. I retained my belongings while she took hers. All of the paperwork was in motion by the middle of September. She hardly spoke to me in the weeks before the final signing. She would text me as if I were her landlord rather than her spouse if she needed something. Could you please send the power bill to me? Have you turned off the internet? That's all. She unexpectedly contacted me one day and asked for a favor. She was in an accident and her automobile was totaled. I realize it's ironic, and requested to use my vehicle to travel to work. No, I told her. Well, can you drive me to work then? She said. The nerve seemed unbelievable to me. I no longer have a problem with you. I meant it when I told her. The last meaningful talk we had was when she hung up on me. I wasn't relieved when the divorce was finalized in December 2023. All I felt was numbness. I reflected on the 14 years of memories, both good and bad, that we had shared. And I realized that the person I believed to be familiar was no longer there, or perhaps she was never who I initially believed her to be. She walked on as if I had never been there. She completely ceased communicating with me. Her mail continued to arrive at my place because she didn't even bother to update her address. She ignored me when I originally texted her to come get it. I eventually started writing a return to sender and remailing it. I realize that sounds trivial, but I had to get over it. By September 2023. Officially, the divorce procedure had begun, and I was at my breaking point. You can relate to this if you've ever experienced something similar. By then, it's neither dramatic nor explosive. It's simply exhausting, as if someone had disconnected the power. And until nothing is left, all of your love, hope, and enthusiasm simply seeps out. She wasn't upset. I wasn't upset. It was nearly mechanized. We would have a quick meeting to sign documents, divide up the utilities, and talk about who was keeping what. The majority of the correspondence took place via text. Instead of two people who had spent more than 10 years creating a life together, it seemed like we were business partners ending a contract. The entire debate about who gets what didn't take long. When she moved out, she packed her belongings, personal belongings, clothing, and any furniture she desired for her flat. Really, I didn't argue. Anything that made me think of her was not what I wanted. The couch on which we used to snuggle. Accept it. We ate dinner at the kitchen table. I don't give a damn. Although that seems dramatic, everything seemed poisoned, as if holding on to those items would only bring our relationship's ghost back to haunt me. I made the decision to remain in the house. I'm aware that some divorcees sell their home to start again, but I was unable to do so. Leaving my house on top of everything else was too much for me to bear, because I've always been the kind of person who detests change. I applied for financial hardship since I was unable to work and thought I would wait as long as possible. I found out through rumors that she was already seeing someone a month after we filed. Most likely the same man I had discovered in her messages. I was not even angry. I was numb, like she was obviously moving on. Now she was that person. The version of her that supported me, cared about me, and gave our marriage the attention it deserved. She had left. Hearing about her new life and the divorce paperwork weren't the most difficult aspects of those months. It was the quiet. After 14 years of having a companion to sit with or converse with, the realization that the house was deserted was startling. The silence was nearly oppressive. I became aware of how little I was caring for myself. I would omit meals without noticing. I stopped doing things I used to like watching sports or playing with my tools. I had no idea what to do, so I would spend hours sitting on the couch looking at my phone and scrolling through useless content. My mother once stopped by to deliver some meals. She remarked, "You can't keep living like this." After noticing how disorganized the house had become, "You must get yourself together." I wanted to explain how, but I refrained from yelling at her since I knew she was correct. After everything I've been through, how can I start over? In addition to my injuries from the accident, I also lost my marriage and felt like a shadow of my former self. I had no idea where to start. The pivotal moment occurred in October 2023. It was at that moment when she called. It was unexpected, and I felt sick to my stomach when I saw her name on my screen. Curiosity won out, even though I wasn't sure if I should respond or ignore it. "Hi there? Hello?" "Flatly," she said. "No, how are you?" No. Small conversation. She made no nonsense of it. "I have to use your vehicle." It was unbelievable to me. "What?" "I was in a car accident," she explained. She needed a method to get to work because her car was totaled. She dismissed my question about her well-being as if it were nothing. "I chose not to visit the hospital. I quote, "Am all right." Then she asked if I might use your automobile for a time. It nearly made me chuckle. She called me for this after everything we had experienced together. Informed her. "No, that isn't taking place." That didn't sit well with her. "So, could you give me a ride to work?" "No," I repeated, firmer this time. "I have doctor's appointments and physical therapy appointments. I am unable to assist you." Her voice changed. "I have no problem with that." I lost my temper at that point. "You're correct. It isn't. Furthermore, you are no longer my issue." I sat there looking at the screen for a minute after she hung up. I felt liberated for the first time, as if I had finally come to terms with the fact that I owed her nothing. Not my energy, not my time, not my car. She had to live with the decisions she had made. I stopped caring for her after that day. Not in an angry, resentful manner. This is just too much. I no longer followed her on social media. I stopped inquiring about her with our mutual friends. Instead, I concentrated on myself. In the weeks preceding the December divorce finalization, I began to gather myself. Despite my back pain and injuries, I forced myself to be more active. I began modestly, going for quick walks outside and attempting to solve small, neglected issues around the house. It was something, but not much. We didn't talk much to one another when the last court date arrived. She had a new appearance, as if she were a stranger with my wife's features. I give the final piece of papers to it. All of this was approved by the judge. We were no longer husband and wife in an instant. She gave me a good luck look as we walked out of the courthouse. I remained silent in response. I simply drove home after walking to my car. When it was finally over, I expected to feel relieved, but instead I felt empty. It's pretty weird. One day, after years of developing a relationship, a few signatures on a document make it seem as though it never happened. The following weeks were quiet yet distinct. I no longer felt oppressed by the quiet in my home. It was serene. I stopped wondering who she was with and what she was doing. I began to concentrate on managing my pain, my health, and my goals for the future. In a strange way, I suppose I owe that to her. I discovered that I had been in survival mode for months by the time the new year arrived. I attempted to psychologically prepare for the day of my divorce's finalization in December 2023, but it still hit me like a ton of bricks. The most peculiar aspect? No longer was it even sadness. It was nothing but void, as if the life I had imagined was simply gone. I was also unsure of what might happen next. Although the weeks following the divorce were slow, I received something unexpected. Clarity. I no longer felt like I had to tread carefully in my own house without her around. I began to find peace in the silence, and it ceased to feel lonely. With coffee in hand, I would sit in my living room and listen to the heaters hum and the odd sound of traffic outside. I know it sounds corny, but I felt at ease for the first time in months. I decided to put myself first, something I hadn't done in a long time. I had entirely lost myself because of my back problems, the disintegrating marriage, and my incapacity to work. I began to make little objectives. I first made myself establish a simple regimen. Every morning at 7 a.m., get out of bed, take a shower, eat breakfast, and go for a quick stroll outside. I continued to attend my physical therapy sessions and made sure I never missed one. I worked on the house as well. At first, it was little things like organizing the garage or cleaning the kitchen, but every tiny accomplishment felt good. The weight of the house had lessened. It began to feel like mine once more. I eventually threw out or gave the items I knew she would never return for after moving her remaining belongings to the basement. It was how I took back my own space. By January 2024, I saw a slight improvement in my back pain. In order to help me manage the pain, the doctor numbing the nerves in my lower back was part of the process. After more than a year, for the first time, it wasn't like I was squirming every time I moved. Even though I wasn't 100% yet, I began to feel optimistic that I may return to normal, or at least almost so, someday. Story 3. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello, Reddit. I never imagined that I would be posting here, but what happened 2 weeks ago is making me completely insane. I need to express it publicly to see whether I'm exaggerating or if this whole thing is as crazy as it seems. It's been eating away at me. It's going to be a doozy, so be ready. I was always the little one growing up. I'm the youngest of 5 children, and my name is Emily. At times, I felt as though I belonged to a different family, because my siblings Josh, Chris, Rachel, and Mike were all so much older than me. They were already starting their adult lives, moving out, or attending college by the time I was old enough to begin making memories. I felt like a strange tag-along they had to put up with, an afterthought. I still adored them, though. You view your elder siblings as heroes when you're the youngest child. When I was younger, I thought Mike hung the moon. The coolest of the older siblings, he was impervious to wrongdoing. Even though Chris was more reserved and solemn, I still loved him. My elder sister, Rachel, was the person I always imagined would open her life to me and teach me how to be like her. Even Josh, the elder one's kid, kept me at a distance, even though he felt the closest to me in age. Mike's wedding was the first time I truly realized how unimportant I was to them. It was my 10th birthday. 10 is that strange age when you feel like you're still young enough to be treated like a child, yet old enough to participate in adult activities. I thought I wasn't the target of Mike and his fiancée Sarah's announcement that they were getting married without children. After all, I wasn't just any kid who would scream or toss food during the vows. His sister was me. The day my parents sat me down is still fresh in my mind. I had been ecstatic. For the special day, I even asked my mother if I may wear one of her necklaces. She said it at that point. Only grown-ups are invited to Mike and Sarah's wedding. You won't be able to make it, Emily. I looked at her for a moment, trying to take it all in. I quote, not like other kids though. Trying to reason with her, I said, I swear I'll keep silent. She gave me a puppy-like pat on the head. Sweetheart, it's only for adults. When you're older, you'll comprehend. I didn't fully comprehend it. I spent hours crying in my room. I wanted to see my brother Mike get married. I wished I could have watched Sarah there. When my sister walked down the aisle, I already had that person in mind. My parents, however, left me with a babysitter instead. I still recall how it felt to look at the clock that day and think about all I was missing. Mike's return from his honeymoon. I hoped he would mention it. Perhaps he would apologize for my absence or share a humorous story from the wedding. However, he didn't. He pretended that I had nothing to do with it, as if I weren't even worthy of recognition. Chris were engaged 2 years later. By then, I was 12, and I assumed that things would be different. I was older, more reserved, and well-behaved. I made sure everyone knew that I didn't complain or make a scene. I thought, okay, but this time I'll be invited, when they stated that his wedding was child-free as well. Not at all. I received the same spiel once more. Only adults are allowed at the wedding, according to Chris and his fiancée. Emily, it isn't intimate, not intimate, it was intimate. When it occurred, how could it not be personal? Twice. This time I tried not to cry. I wanted to act more mature because I was older. I didn't yell or plead. While my folks were making their explanations, I just sat quietly. My mother even made an effort to console me. One day you'll have your own wedding and it will be amazing. You'll see. However, it didn't improve my mood. Something was beginning to dawn on me. At least not in the same sense that I did. My siblings did not consider me family. I was 15 when Rachel got engaged. I was a full-fledged teenager by that point, and all I wanted was to feel accepted. Initially, Rachel had no intention of prohibiting children from attending her wedding. She hoped everyone would attend. Naturally, though, the family had to step in. Things like, "It's so refreshing to have a wedding without kids running wild," and "Children just make things so chaotic," were common statements made by my aunts and uncles. Rachel finally gave in. The ruling was changed to no. One younger than 16. It felt like a slap in the face since I was 15 and 15. I asked Rachel if I could just get an exception. "Your sister is me. I swear I'll keep silent." Rachel gave me a serious look and asked, "What about the other kids if I make an exception for you? It would not be equitable. Just. Do you mean me?" I went crazy. I began to shout. "I can't attend any of your weddings, which is unfair. I am not a mere child. Your sister is me." My parents became involved at that point. For being disrespectful to Rachel and creating controversy, I received a 6-month grounding. Half a year? The majority of that time was spent in my room, simply wallowing in my hurt and rage. I didn't even bother to inquire when Josh proposed to me at the age of 17. I knew in advance that I would not be invited. The announcement did really come. Wedding without children. I had become numb to it by then. I refrained from crying. I didn't question why, and I didn't yell. I simply accepted it. What hurt the most, though? Amanda, my recently 18-year-old cousin, was invited. It came to my attention through the family rumor. Evidently, they believed that 18 was the threshold. I didn't miss the irony. Amanda reached the enchanted age of adulthood, so even though she was just a few months older than me, she was allowed to attend. I simply shrugged when my folks questioned why I didn't make a big issue out of praising Josh. I texted him briefly. "Well done. I hope today is fantastic." Then, as usual, I shut myself in my room. I had begun to emotionally tune out by then. I came to the realization that they simply didn't care about me. I wasn't their younger sibling. They seldom gave me much thought as a child, and it was painful. It ached like hell. It had been 0 years since the last wedding. To be honest, I was just tired and gave up trying to fit in with my siblings' lives. I'm sick of being excluded. I'm sick of being the little sister that nobody gave a damn about unless it suited them. I had essentially left the family dynamic by the time I met Tyler, my future fiancé. I no longer had high expectations of anyone. The first person to truly listen was Tyler. When I described my family to him, I recall telling him, while seated on his couch, that I had been excluded from 4 of my siblings' weddings, and he appeared truly surprised. "Hold on, you weren't invited? Not even at the age of 15? "Nope," I said, feigning that the pain had subsided. "What on earth? Their sister is you." "Oh," he said. After a minute of sitting there and shaking his head, he added, "That's really messed up." That's probably when I realized it was seriously broken. I'd been telling myself it was normal for so long. On paper, child-free weddings made sense. I mean, it wasn't like they were specifically targeting me. However, my family decided to keep me out 4 times. No sibling ever said, "Hey, Emily ought to be there." It wasn't typical. I was therefore certain of one thing when Tyler and I became engaged a few years later. It was going to be different at my wedding. There would be a lot of people who genuinely cared about me at my wedding. Not just those who showed up because they were supposed to, but those who wanted to celebrate me. That's when I decided what to do. I had no intention of inviting my siblings. There was nothing particularly dramatic about it. I didn't declare it in the family group chat or write an angry letter. I simply did not include them on the guest list. Simple as that. I knew it would blow up eventually, but I figured I'd cross that bridge when I got there. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months before the wedding. My mom called me randomly one afternoon, acting weirdly chipper. I should have known something was up. "So, Emily," she said in that voice she always used when she wanted something, "how are the wedding plans coming along?" "Good," I said cautiously. "Everything's almost done." "That's great," she said, pausing for a moment before adding, "Your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My heart started pounding. I didn't want to have this conversation. Not yet. "Yeah, I sent them out," I said, trying to sound casual. She didn't miss a beat. "Well, they didn't get one. Maybe it got lost in the mail." I sighed. "Mom, I didn't invite them." There was silence on the other end of the line. Just a heavy, shocked pause. Then came the explosion. What? Emily, how could you not invite your own family, your siblings? What's wrong with you? I gripped the phone and tried to stay calm. They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom. Not a single one of them. So I'm returning the favor. It's fair. She sounded like I just committed a crime. That was different. You were young. They didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. Well, it hurt anyway. And now I'm done pretending like it didn't. She started in on the guilt trip immediately. Emily, you're being spiteful. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this. What are people going to think? And there it was. What will people think? My mom's favorite concern. I cut her off before she could say anything else. I don't care what people think, Mama. This is my wedding, and I'm only inviting individuals that care about me. They didn't care enough to include me in their big days, so I don't see why they deserve to be at mine. She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. That night, the group chat blew up. It started with Rachel being false as usual. Hey, Mom, did something happen with the mail? We haven't gotten our invites yet. Then came Chris blunt, as always. What's going on? Why aren't we invited? I stared at my phone for a long time, considering whether or not to reply. Part of me wanted to lay it all out, to tell them precisely how much they'd wounded me over the years. But another part of me didn't see the purpose. They wouldn't get it. They didn't. So I remained silent. I just got out of Red's talk. When Tyler saw that I was silent at supper, he inquired as to why. He shook his head when I showed him the messages. You don't have to give them a reason. They made their decisions. I trailed off, though. They will paint me in a negative light. I am aware of that. Permit them. He spoke aggressively. You are aware of the reality. That's the only important thing. My folks unexpectedly arrived at my residence the following day. I didn't even need to inquire as to their purpose. As soon as I opened the door, my mother rushed in. Emily, what are you thinking? Excluding your own siblings from your wedding invitations. What sort of individual does that? My tolerance was becoming thin, but I made an effort to remain composed. I'm not inviting them to my wedding, Mom, because I told you that they didn't think I was significant enough to be invited to theirs. At last, my father raised his voice, his tone severe. Emily, you're acting like a child. Something that occurred years ago is something you're clinging to. I lost my temper at that point. Dad, I was a kid when they did it. They all turned me away when I pleaded to attend their weddings. Don't accuse me of being immature. 4 times I was the one left crying at home. They were at a loss for words. This time I refused to allow my mom shame me. Even though she seemed like she was going to cry. I quote, am not going to change my mind, but you can continue to defend them if you want. They would have revealed it back then if they truly cared about me. They departed in a rage and frustration. My siblings' communications became more obscene throughout the course of the following few days. Chris referred to me as self-centered. According to Rachel, I was destroying the family. Josh didn't even try to make it seem nice. Emily, you're being petty. Adult up. None of them received a response from me. I no longer had to justify myself. One night, as I was going through their notes, Tyler gave me a hug and said, You know, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I also felt proud of myself for the first time. I thought the family drama would end after the initial round. I assumed that after complaining to each other for a while, and perhaps to some distant cousins, they would move on. When my family didn't get what they wanted, that's how it generally went. However, I didn't realize they were going to make this a huge fuss. It began modestly. Naturally, Rachel was compelled to publish a passive-aggressive status on Facebook. Family endures forever. Even when some people lose the meaning of the word. I worried they may become stuck since I rolled my eyes so hard. Tyler shook his head when I showed him the post as he was scrolling beside me on the couch. Is she 14? In essence, I muttered, attempting to dismiss it. It didn't matter, I told myself. I was aware of the reality and knew I was doing appropriately. It still bothered me, though. When your own sister goes out of her way to disparage you in public, it's difficult to avoid feeling offended. The story didn't end there. Little jabs began to appear in our extended family group chat over the course of the following several days. One afternoon, Tyler checked his phone, even though I had muted it long ago, and said, "Emily, you might want to see this." Messages were flying. Rachel. When family members start putting small grievances ahead of love, it's quite sad. Chris, I simply don't get it. I believed that we were superior than this. Then, Mike. The good old days. As the oldest, I am the most knowledgeable. Mike made the decision to shoot. "I had no idea you were harboring such resentment toward Emily. It's quite depressing. Relationships are being ruined because of something that occurred years ago." I was simmering with rage as I gazed at the television. They failed to grasp it. They were still unable to grasp it. They gave the impression that I was exaggerating a small problem, as though they hadn't excluded me all my life. I wanted to respond. I wanted to show them how hypocritical they were by typing out everything they had done. However, I was aware. They would simply get more ammunition if you argued with them. To avoid accepting responsibility, they would manipulate my words to suggest that I was dramatic, unstable, or anything else they wanted to say. Rather, I did the one thing they didn't anticipate. I departed from the group chat. My mother called me that evening. She immediately started ranting as soon as I replied, which is how I knew she had heard about the group chat event. "Emily, what's wrong with you? Hello, mother?" "Flatly," I said. She yelled, "Don't start with that attitude. Are you aware of your actions? Your siblings are inconsolable. Your actions are ruining this family, heartbroken." I gave a sour laugh. Throughout my entire childhood, they disregarded me. They are now heartbroken nevertheless. "Let me rest." She said, "You're being so spiteful. This is how you've always been, clinging to grudges and making everything about yourself." I lost it at that point. It's me who harbors resentment. Mike got married when I was 10 years old. 10? I wanted to be there, so I sobbed. And you all said that I wasn't important enough to be mentioned. It didn't end there either. It kept happening over and over. I pleaded with Rachel to let me attend her wedding, but she refused, saying it wouldn't be fair. She dismissed it, saying it was years ago. Yes, and the feelings it gave me are still with me. Back then, you all decided I wasn't significant enough. Why do you think you should now have a front row ticket to my life? She had no response to that. Rather, she attempted to change the course of events. "Emily, it's not about the weddings. This is about you being resentful and pushing everyone away. Tyler is most likely supporting you, is he not?" I let out a groan. "Don't blame Tyler, Mom. He is not involved in this. This is about me at last understanding that I am worthy of more than being treated as like I am unimportant." As if to pretend to be the worried mother, her voice grew softer. "You don't get it, Emily. In the end, family is all you'll have. Your family is permanent, but your friends and partners come and go." "No," I answered firmly. "Your family should be concerned about you. They are meant to adore and care for you. You haven't been to me like that." She broke down in tears. I realized that my big dramatic sobbing were more about guilt tripping than anything else. She cried as she continued, "One day, Emily, you'll regret this. You'll see." "No, I doubt I will," I said in a low voice and hung up. It worsened during the course of the following week. I couldn't stand the continual hateful remarks, so I blocked Rachel and Chris on social media. In an apparent attempt to reason with Tyler, my mother called him twice. He didn't respond. Then I got a lengthy email from Mike. Yes, a real email concerning family harmony and forgiveness. He even dared to quote a passage from the Bible about letting go of anger. I didn't answer. One evening, Tyler and I sat down and I let everything out. They seem intent on making me appear to be the issue. They don't realize how dysfunctional it is that after years of ignoring me, they lost it when I finally defended myself. Tyler said, "You know what it is? They don't feel angry about not being invited. They're upset because they can no longer manipulate you." That was like a kick to the stomach. He was correct. My family had always viewed me as an afterthought, as if they could fire them whenever they wanted. They couldn't handle it, though, now that I was doing something for myself that they couldn't control. They will eventually move past it. I said. I wasn't sure if I believed it, though. Tyler then made a statement that truly resonated with me. Perhaps they will. They might not. However, it's not your problem in any case. He was correct. It dawned on me for the first time that I owed my family nothing, nor my attention, nor my time. and definitely not a wedding invitation. A week later, I received a brief text from my dad that was filled with guilt. "Your mother is not doing well, Emily. All of this is definitely upsetting her. Perhaps you might think again." I gave it a good look before responding. Perhaps she ought to have considered it before ignoring me for so long. For the first time in a long time, I blocked his number after hitting send. I was liberated. There was an odd mixture of worry and enthusiasm in the weeks before my wedding. On the one hand, I was overjoyed to marry Tyler and experience the day I had been looking forward to since I was a young child. However, the turmoil with my family continued to linger like an unwanted visitor. My parents had ceased phoning me directly, most likely as a result of my blocking my mom's number following her most recent outburst, however, that didn't. The worst was when my aunt unexpectedly called. When her name appeared on my phone, I became skeptical right away because I hadn't spoken to her in years. She got straight to the point when I responded, "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this, Emily, honey." In her charming yet patronizing voice, she said, "Family is family. Leaving your siblings out of your wedding is wrong." With a groan, I tightened my hold on the phone. "It's not only about the wedding, Aunt Linda. This has been developing for years. It's family, but I won't change my mind." She pressed as if that word would make everything better. "They probably didn't intend to harm you in the past. Can you just be the larger person and let it go?" I tried not to cry when I closed my eyes. "You don't have to let others walk all over you to be the bigger person. It all comes down to understanding when to prioritize yourself." She paused on the other end, and I heard her let out a loud sigh. "All I can hope for is that you won't regret this. Your family will be absent one day, and you will miss them." I remained silent. I simply hung up. The wedding morning. I felt a strange mix of calm and anxiety when I woke up. It was not typical. What if there is a problem? Wedding day jitters, sort of. I felt more like I was holding my breath. Even though I was aware that my family was not invited, I couldn't help but worry that they would somehow make an appearance, in some way. However, Tyler, being the incredible person that he is, wouldn't allow me to think about it. He simply grinned and replied, when I confided in him about my concerns as we were getting ready separately. "We are the focus of this day. Nothing else is important. I'll personally escort anyone who attempts to destroy it." I laughed at that, and I felt lighter for the first time in weeks. The location we selected was ideal. It was cozy and small, a flower-surrounded garden. The trees were hung with twinkling lights, and a small gazebo where we would exchange vows. A huge, extravagant wedding was not what I wanted. I was looking for something genuine and loving, and it was precisely that. Along with some extended family who had genuinely shown me kindness throughout the years, my closest friends were present. As I was finishing up my dress in front of the mirror, my best friend and maid of honor, Jenna, entered and smiled. It felt right. "You look fantastic. Regards." I spoke quietly while I experienced a range of emotions. For a while, Jenna perched on the side of the couch and observed me. "Are you all right?" After a moment of hesitation, I nodded. "Yes, I'm not sure. I suppose it's sad, not today. The fact that my family isn't here makes today ideal." Leaning forward, she scowled. "Emily, it's acceptable to feel that even if you made the right decision, it still hurts." Her remarks really got to me. Tears filled my eyes as I turned to face her. I wanted them to care. When I was a child, I wanted them to stand up for me, but they never did. Jenna got up and gave me a strong embrace. "You don't require their blessing. You are loved by others. Pay attention to that." I took a big breath and nodded. She was correct. My family wasn't the focus of today. Tyler and I were the focus. I was so taken aback by the grandeur of everything as the ceremony began that I lost all sense of time. I recall thinking, "This is it," as I stood at the end of the aisle and gazed at Tyler. This is the sensation of happiness. I experienced a wave of liberation as I approached him. I was no longer the small sister who was forgotten. I wasn't the young person who pleaded to be admitted but was denied entry. People who genuinely loved me and wanted to see me happy were all around me as a bride. The vows were flawless. Tyler, you swear to always be there for me, to love me, and to protect me, and I make the same pledge. When we finally said, "I do," not a single eye in the audience, including mine, was dry. The reception exceeded my expectations in every way. We chuckled. We had some food. Until our feet hurt, we danced. My friends gave us a toast while telling us amusing anecdotes and expressing their sincere hopes for the future. Tyler, S parents, who had always shown me such kindness, expressed their pride in having me in their family. I once crept aside from the throng to observe everything. As I stood at the edge of the garden, I saw the people laughing together and the lights sparkling in the trees, and I had been believing the lie for so long because I felt so full. I was informed by my family that I was unimportant and unworthy of their presence. However, as I stood there and observed all of these individuals who genuinely cared about me, I came to a realization. For those who truly deserved to know me, I mattered. One of my relatives drew me aside later that evening as the event was coming to an end. I definitely shouldn't have said this, but I let out a groan. "Emily? Now what?" She had a sheepish appearance. "It looks like your mom and Rachel hosted a dinner party tonight, such as a substitute for your wedding." After a moment of staring at her, I started giggling. "Are you serious?" She gave a nod. "I am aware that it is pitiful. I just wanted to let you know." I continued to giggle and shook my head. "It's okay. Let them have their party of sympathy. I'm hoping the dinner is tasty." My cousin obviously thought I would be unhappy, but I wasn't. It was evidence, if anything, that I had made the proper choice. My entire life, my family had excluded me and then attempted to defend it. They couldn't take it now that I was setting the boundaries. Everyone gathered around Tyler and me as we moved together during our final dance of the evening. "I'm so glad we did this," I muttered. He grinned at me from below. Me to him. This is only the start. And I believed it for the first time. There was no family present. The happiest day of my life was missed by them. But I didn't lose that. They did. Because I realized I had everything I had ever needed, and none of it had come from them, as I glanced around the room filled with laughter and love. After the wedding, I believed the worst was behind us. Yes, I did. It had been the ideal day. I got all I wanted and more. Additionally, I thought I had finally moved past the absurdity of my family. I attended the event and didn't miss them. I didn't pause to consider what may have happened if they had been present. It was sufficient that I was surrounded by kind people. But if I've discovered anything about my family, it's that they dislike being disregarded. It seems as though they were unable to accept that I was content without them. Thus, they made the decision to do one final stir. A week after the wedding, Rachel sent out the first message. It was Rachel, of course. When it came to family strife, she had always been the first to point the finger. "I saw some of your wedding photos. It's unbelievable that you kept it in a garden." Appeared informal. "However, I suppose that's what you desired. Stunned, I gazed at the message. She was unable to even act polite. The fact that she simply left me alone was insufficient. She needed something to be critical about. I was inclined to respond cynically, saying that although her wedding may have been more extravagant, at least mine wasn't filled with phony smiles and inconsiderate guests. However, I stopped myself. I didn't respond to her. I began receiving texts from members of my extended family that I hadn't spoken to in years a few days later. Chris, Mike, and Rachel were apparently on a mission to make me the bad guy. Linda, my aunt. It's the same person that attempted to guilt-trip me before to the wedding. Sent me a second mail. I quote, "Am not sure what transpired between you and your siblings, Emily, but they're in a lot of pain. Rachel claims that you're ignoring her despite her attempts to get in touch. Perhaps it's time to move on from the past." I rolled my eyes and sighed. I had to explain this how many times? How many people had to be involved in this disaster before my siblings realized I wasn't going to back down? Tyler sat down next to me after noticing my frustration. One more voyage of guilt? He looked at my phone and asked, "Yes, once more, Aunt Linda." "They're hurt," she says. He gave a snort. "Hurt because you are no longer under their power. The title of this article is, 'My Siblings Won't Let Me Go to Their Weddings, So I Do the Same.'" Hi everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the best ways you can help us out is to subscribe. As we've observed, the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello, Reddit. I never imagined that I would be posting here, but what happened 2 weeks ago is making me completely insane. I need to express it publicly to see whether I'm exaggerating or if this whole thing is as crazy as it seems. It's been eating away at me. It's going to be a doozy, so be ready. I was always the little one growing up. I'm the youngest of 5 children and my name is Emily. At times, I felt as though I belonged to a different family because my siblings Josh, Chris, Rachel, and Mike were all so much older than me. They were already starting their adult lives, moving out or attending college by the time I was old enough to begin making memories. I felt like a strange tag-along they had to put up with, an afterthought. I still adored them though. You view your elder siblings as heroes when you're the youngest child. When I was younger, I thought Mike hung the moon. The coolest of the older siblings, he was impervious to wrongdoing. Even though Chris was more reserved and solemn, I still loved him. My elder sister, Rachel, was the person I always imagined would open her life to me and teach me how to be like her. Even Josh, the elder one's kid, kept me at a distance, even though he felt the closest to me in age. Mike's wedding was the first time I truly realized how unimportant I was to them. It was my 10th birthday. 10 is that strange age when you feel like you're still young enough to be treated like a child, yet old enough to participate in adult activities. I thought I wasn't the target of Mike and his fiancée Sarah's announcement that they were getting married without children. After all, I wasn't just any kid who would scream or toss food during the vows. His sister was me. The day my parents sat me down is still fresh in my mind. I had been ecstatic. For the special day, I even asked my mother if I may wear one of her necklaces. She said it at that point. Only grown-ups are invited to Mike and Sarah's wedding. Emily. You will not be able to attend. I tried to think for a moment as I looked at her, but I'm not like other kids. Trying to reason with her, I said, I swear I'll keep silent. She gave me a puppy-like pat on the head. Sweetheart, it's only for adults. When you're older, you'll comprehend. I didn't fully comprehend it. I spent hours crying in my room. I wanted to see my brother Mike get married. I already had Sarah in mind when I saw my sister walk down the aisle, and I wanted to be there to see it. My parents, however, left me with a babysitter instead. I still recall how it felt to look at the clock that day and think about all I was missing. Mike's return from his honeymoon. I hoped he would mention it. Perhaps he would apologize for my absence or share a humorous story from the wedding. However, he didn't. He pretended that I had nothing to do with it, as if I weren't even worthy of recognition. Chris were engaged 2 years later. By then, I was 12, and I assumed that things would be different. I was quieter, older, and well-behaved. I made sure everyone knew that I didn't complain or make a scene. I thought, okay, but this time I'll be invited, when they stated that his wedding was child-free as well. Not at all. I received the same spiel once more. Chris and his fiancée desire that only adults attend the wedding. Emily. It isn't intimate. Not intimate. It was intimate. When it occurred, how could it not be personal? Twice. This time, I tried not to cry. I wanted to act more mature because I was older. I didn't yell or plead. While my folks were making their explanations, I just sat quietly. My mother even made an effort to console me. One day, you will get married. And it will be fantastic. You'll see. However, it didn't improve my mood. Something was beginning to dawn on me. I was not considered family by my siblings. Not as I perceived them anyway. I was 15 when Rachel got engaged. I was a full-fledged teenager by that point, and all I wanted was to feel accepted. Rachel didn't even make a strategy at first.